Welcome, guys, to Music Studio Tours here in New Zealand with the wonderful Nathan Haines.
Hey,
How
Ralph.
are you, buddy?
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Hey, great to have you in your creative space. We are here where you make a lot of your music. You have your guest musicians come in and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on recently.
Well, I'm a jazz electronic musician. My
Yep.
father's a jazz musician. I grew up in New Zealand playing jazz in the 80s when hip-hop came along, and that sort of changed my world, really. So I've always, apart from being apart from being very into jazz, I've always been into this cross-pollination of jazz and other musics.
Yep.
So I left New Zealand at the age of 19 and studied in New York for a number of years, and then moved to London in 1995, which that was my sort of second or third part of my musical education, really, when I discovered dance music, and then I discovered drum and bass, and then ended up being one half of a production duo called Cyclone. So we did a lot of stuff for Metalheads and Reinforced and those labels. So the most recent work I've been doing is actually with A-Sides, real name Jason Cambridge. So we're doing finally after 20 years, we're doing an album for Metalheads for Goldie's label. So it's quite funny how it's sort of come full circle. Drum and bass, for people who remember in the late 90s, it was so huge around the world, and then it sort of went underground again. So I guess the sound that we were pioneering back then was, like I say, this cross-pollination between dance and jazz musics. The albums I made in the UK, I guess the two which people might know the most is Squire for Hire. And
That is my favourite record. Just a bit of a backstory. Yeah, I used to DJ that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a really good track. It goes down really well. Who's the female vocalist?
So that was with Marlena Shaw.
Marlena Shaw,
who's a great friend, and I've been so blessed to work with her over these years.
Yep.
So those two albums, Squire for Hire and Sound Travels, were produced by Phil Asher.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to a lot of the scene that was going on in London at that time. Also the broken beat scene, I guess you could call it. Myself and Mark de Clive Lowe were two New Zealanders involved in that scene. Mark's, of course, gone on to have his international career. He's based in America now. I played with him last month. He
Recently,
came out,
when he came in,
which was great.
The showcase, he does really well. Yep.
So it was really amazing, I guess, to be brought into. Everyone was very open, and I was just a young guy from New Zealand. I was 23 when I arrived in London, and people really took me under their wing. Marlena Shaw, she was like a real life coach to me, maybe.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking in hotels, and we did several tours around Europe, and we just recently did Ronnie Scott's together in London. So she's just, I guess, for my life, I feel at this time in my life, I feel very, I have a lot of gratitude and thanks for the people who've really helped me and supported me, and in some ways as well, I sort of see in retrospect that I might have thought back then that I was good and that I earned a place, but these people, I guess they could just see that I was young and that I was keen, and that they sort of took me into their life and into the scene, So I've had a really amazing life in music. I'm working on my 10th solo album.
Amazing.
So I've done everything from electronic records to drum and bass records to very pure
jazz,
straight ahead jazz records, recorded in a very traditional manner, straight to 2-track. So the last two albums I made like that were called The Poet's Embrace and Vermilion Skies was the follow-up, which both recorded at York Street, amazing studio, unfortunately not around anymore. So The Poet's Embrace was also released in the UK on Warner Classics and Jazz, and people seem to like the fact it was recorded straight to 2-track. For the nerds out there, straight to 2-track with no mixing or overdubs onto a vintage late 50s vintage Ampex tape machine. There's a crazy, amazing guy in New Zealand called Greg Bryce, or Ecodec, and he makes amazing valve equipment. I can show you some of the equipment Greg's built for me over the years.
We'll go through that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a bit of, that's a short summary.
Hey, you are no stranger, obviously, to a lot of us. Squire for Hire did massively well. It was a gold record here in New Zealand. Some other notable sort of career highlights that you've done that are just stuck in your mind?
Yeah, I think we were talking before, but after I made Sky for Hire, I came back out to New Zealand, and then I was asked to do a series of concerts with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
So that was, and an album. So, well, I was asked to do the 3 concerts: Auckland, Aotea Centre, Wellington, Michael Fowler Centre, and the Christchurch Town Hall. And I spoke with the record company at the time and was able to get funding and get a good deal to record the concert in an empty Michael Fowler Centre.
Yeah, wow.
Which was amazing. So we set up the microphones. Oceania helped me record it, and then my brother Joel Haines, amazing producer. Actually, you should go and talk to him. He does a lot of film and television now, but he actually mixed the album. So that was a real an amazing experience working with the NZSO. I also had enlisted the help of Alan Broadbent, who's a Kiwi living in the States for 40 years or more. He's won 2 Grammys, and he's an arranger, amazing piano player. I think he's one of those New Zealanders that the real music people know about him, but he's not really on the radar for most New Zealanders. But he is just an incredible musician. So that was amazing to work with him. He wasn't in the country, but he arranged a lot of my own songs. So he took for instance, a song from Sky for Hire, one of the jazz ballads that I sung on there, and then rearranged it for the orchestra.
Okay, wow, that's cool.
So that was really, really fantastic. That was a real career highlight for me, if you're talking about career highlights.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Album-wise. And I think the 2 albums, those 2 jazz records I made, The Poet's Embrace and Vermilion Skies, I was given the TUI award for both those records. That was a really amazing experience, having to get my chops together, or chops for the non-musicians, just to really get to that level of facility on my instruments, so that we're doing everything live, or everything, the whole band was live. So that was a really great way of recording, as opposed to these days, like in this sort of environment where you're constantly adding to things, and you get a people in, a person there,
piecemealing it kind of thing. Yeah,
which is a very modern way of recording it. It's not better or worse, it's just different. So that was really neat to do those records, and I actually hope to do a 3rd one. So we'll have the 3 records, and then and then one, and I'd like to do a box set of the 3. For international market. I mean, so much has changed in music. Just every year it changes, just in terms of how people consume music. So I guess I'm figuring out different ways how to still find my audience and then get the music out to people. I think for someone like me now, I've always been underground. I've never had the million sellers or anything like that. I've always had an audience. I've had a small international audience in different places through albums like Sky for Hire. So I think it's gone more boutique. I think a lot of the people who have bought my records will be interested in vinyl. So there's ways to be able to still contribute and be part of the music scene. So much of it is driven by pop music and the big sales, and the record companies are very open about that. And I had a meeting with an MD of a major label here recently, and he said, look, to be honest, it's all about pop music. I was also told by another MD recently that they're going 80% digital now. So an artist like me, I have done my releases physically, in other words, CDs, and that's all disappearing. So I love owning something.
Do you consider it a good thing or a bad thing, or is it just
Just is, man.
Just is.
I guess it's like photography. Photography moved from film into digital. It's the same with music. I think people talk about a vinyl renaissance, and it's true. More people are buying vinyl now, but it's still a very, very, very small percentage. So I think now promotion is more important than ever, so that people are aware of who you are. You've just got to be smart with that. So I think a big part of my next budget will be promotion, and in trying to let people know about
just letting people know about the music. And
yeah.
So I mean, you've been doing this for ages. Tell us about what music means to you, and in terms of when you first got started, what was like, for example, my question would be like, what is that personal record that you first heard and you're like, I want to do something like that? Like, what Can you think back and?
Well, my dad played a lot of music at home, being a musician.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess because I started learning so young, both my brother and I started learning so young, it was never ever a question. It was always like, I am going to do that. I guess I remember when those Stevie Wonder records, Fulfilling His First Finale, and that period of 70s records came out. I remember really digging them when I was young, you know. I mean, Fulfilling His First Finale came out in 77, so I was only 5, but my dad would have been listening to it. So we're talking about before I was 10.
Yeah.
I really dug my father's Weather Report records. So Weather Report's an amazing jazz fusion, for better don't like that word, but
yeah.
so their most famous album's called Heavy Weather, which came out in 77. I remember being obsessed by them. I was really into Pat Metheny in the early 80s, maybe. So definitely with Weather Report, I was like, I want to do something like that.
And did you always, because I mean, you're a really good saxophone player or keys, what was sort of the first instrument that you...
I started on recorder and then flute when I was 6.
Oh, wow.
And then when I got to 13...
That is street cred right there, if you start on recorder.
Recorder and then flute, yeah. I didn't start playing saxophone until I was 13.
Oh, wow.
So
cool.
I went to Northcote College, great college, great music department, and the head of the music department there, Stu Martin was his name, he had a tenor, and I desperately wanted to play tenor saxophone but it's quite big. Yeah. Obviously, I didn't get around to playing alto, and also because by that stage, by the age of 12, I was gigging on flute with my dad. Had a band called the Second Generation. It was me and my brother and my dad and a few other people. We actually did a television series for TVNZ. There used to be a show in the 80s called Jazz Scene that used to show on Sunday afternoons. Okay. And they used to show old stuff, and they used to do in a studio audience, actually, where KMC is now for the Auckland University, on the music department at the top of Shortland Street. That used to be a TVNZ studio. Cool. And it still is, the studio is still there, and that's the main room for the music school now. And we did a program there with an interview, and that exists somewhere. I might give you some footage if you want to include this. Okay. So by that time, we were gigging, playing quite big festivals. There used to be a jazz festival here called the Southern Comfort Jazz and Blues Festival, which is at the Sheraton Hotel. So by that time, my brother and I were playing in a professional capacity to big audiences at these big festivals. Also, I was meeting a lot of the musicians. My father used to back a lot of musicians, so I, from very young, I'd go and see my dad play with these American guys, these cool musicians. So of course I wanted to be. There was no question. Yeah. I wanted to be. I was like, family. I was intrigued by this world of music, and I never thought it was weird that I was into jazz. And then of course when hip hop came along and I heard the samples, I was like, wow, that's Bob James. Yeah. Well, no, I heard the samples and I was like, that's Bob James. That's so and so. I heard a lot of the records, a lot of the samples from early hip hop. I remember when Midnight Marauders came out and Tribe Called Quest, and I love that record, but I love the samples, and I've always loved that aspect of the great hip hop, the golden age of hip hop, I guess. I've just been re-listening to a lot of Dilla lately, and I had Fantastic Volume 2 in my car for about 3 months, which is from 1997. Okay. And it's just such great music. Great music. It's just great, timeless music, and this, like, the actual production on it. I mean, Dilla's production and beat making is it's amazing. He's like the Duke Ellington of hip hop, and the sound he created through his productions is so timeless, and you can sample any of his snares and put it on a brand new track. So I guess that's what's kept me interested, really, as well as being a saxophone player and a musician. I haven't even spoken that much about saxophone.
Well, that's one of your main instruments.
It is my main instrument. It is my main instrument, but it's all the production aspect has always fascinated me since I was a kid.
How did you get into production? Was that through necessity, or was it from the fruits of, say, Squire for Hire that you just started acquiring sort of production gear and doing it that
Well-
way, or was it always there from the beginning? Or?
Well, I guess how it started is that I was playing flute and my dad bought a Juno 6, a Roland
Wow.
Juno 6.
Yep.
In about 1984. So that would have been, he bought it second hand. 1984, yeah, it was about 1984, I think. I'll have to ask my dad.
Dad.
And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And the Roland Juno, I've actually got the exact synth just
Cool.
outside. I've got it. It needs to be restored. It was under someone's house for ages. But anyway,
Yeah.
I say I wanted this, but there was hardly any in the country. We'll get onto that later. But so Dad bought a Juno 6, and I remember putting on the headphones and trying to emulate the string sound from Lyle Mays, who's the keyboard player in Pat Metheny's band. I was trying to get, so that was when I actually learned how to program a synth.
Yep.
So, and the Juno 6 is like a simplified version of that. So that was when I got interested in not just my own instruments, but interested in keyboards.
Keyboards,
Now
yep.
I'm
Okay.
not a keyboard player, but I use a lot of keyboards in my production. So then first record I made was in 1994, and that was called Shift Left, and that was, I'd been studying in New York at that time, and then came back with all these ideas. Got some great musicians on the album, including Kevin Field on keyboards, my brother on guitar, Paulie
Cool.
Fuimana from OMC,
Wow.
bless him, he's not around anymore, he was on a track, and this was in the studio at Alan Jansen's studio, this synth here. Which we
Okay.
can, but anyway, so I got that, and then when I moved to London, then started working with Phil Asher. I got a laptop, started working in Logic,
Yeah.
and then started putting, just really started putting stuff together. I think it's really, really important for young musicians to get their head around, like a program like Logic, and recording themselves, making little demos.
Is that your DAW of choice, Logic? Or?
Well, a lot of people use Ableton now, but I think if you play a live instrument, if you're just a keyboard player, it doesn't matter so much. If you're playing a live instrument like saxophone or a singer, you need some sort of good digital interface. So I've got the Prism Orpheus,
Yeah.
which is the front end of my studio. It's got 8 ins, 8 outs. So that's my sound card, really high quality sound card. So that converts the signal from analog to digital. You don't have to go as high end as that, but you need something which converts the signal from analog to digital, and then back out to your speakers.
Okay. Well,
Um,
actually, now that we're in that topic, maybe
yeah.
we should just have a quick look around. And
Yeah, sure.
do you want to do that? Okay. Sure. Okay, cool. So follow us through and take us around the studio.
Yeah, this isn't the most romantic piece of equipment, but as I say, this is the Prism Orpheus. So it's just was the highest quality sound card that I could get at the time.
Yeah.
Which was maybe 5 years ago in the UK. They're still making it. It's just a very clean, transparent, high quality way of converting whatever I record into the digital domain.
Yeah.
Because you want it to be as close to the recorded source as possible. So
Okay.
that's synth-wise, I got this several years ago. So this is a Roland Jupiter 8 from 1981, thereabouts, 1980. I got this in New Zealand. It's been retrofitted
Wow.
with MIDI, and it was their flagship synthesizer when this came out when I was a kid. It was just everyone wanted one. They were very expensive. They're still very,
How
very
does it
expensive.
sound?
So I've used this synth on most of my records.
Wow.
That's the it's a great.
It's very versatile, isn't it?
That's just on the arpeggiator, but it's an analog synthesizer. It's got 2 VCOs per voice, so that's the voltage controlled oscillators, as opposed to digitally controlled. So it's a true analog synthesizer. So it's got 16 VCOs in it. It's got onboard arpeggio, which was made very famous by. It's been in the millions of millions of songs. But yeah, it's it's an amazing synthesizer. I use it all the time. The thing about it is it's sort of infinite. Like it's not the sort of synth where I'm bored of it. It's actually every time I turn it on,
there's something
it
new,
surprises
something magic.
me.
Okay,
It's
wow.
really, really incredible, very, very incredible synth. And I feel very lucky that I own it.
Wow, that's awesome.
So this is a very rare keyboard, very interesting rare keyboard. It's a Sequential Circuits Prophet T8.
Okay.
There's only a couple. They made less than 200 of them, so there's very few in the world. They made this around the early 80s.
Yeah.
It was bought out at the same. Apparently, the story is it was bought out at the same trade fair as the Yamaha DX7. So this was 10 times the price of a DX7 and about 5 times as heavy. Very, very complicated, and so it sort of sounded the death knell for the company, really, because it was the flagship, but it was very expensive,
very expensive
complicated. So the thing about this is that it has the keyboard is one of the best keyboard actions for any keyboard, and if I ask any piano player, they just love it because it's got a fully weighted, incredible action on this keyboard. Unlike this, which isn't even velocity or touch sensitive, this is it's got aftertouch, and it was used on the same Synclavier used it for their keyboards, and I was talking about Pat Metheny before, but he was a big Synclavier guy, as were people like Trevor Horn in the 80s. So this is incredible. Once again, an incredible synthesizer. Quite difficult to program. It's not like the thing is with Japanese synths as opposed to American synths. The American synths like Oberheim, Sequential Circuits, they've got a much bigger, beefier sound, and they're usually harder to program. The Japanese synths like the Roland, they're usually a lot more easier to program, I find.
Can we get a demo of what this one sounds like?
We'll put this.
So what is that you're plugging that into?
Well, this is this thing that Greg Eckerdeck made. It's a valve preamp.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's
So
a
we can-
preamp.
Yeah, so this is
I thought it was a reverb chamber or something. But
No, this is a valve. So this is a valve preamp that Greg Bryce or Eckerdeck made specifically. He actually made it to record this mic, which is a valve, vintage valve Neumann M149, which is my
beautiful.
go-to vocal and saxophone mic.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So he actually made this preamp to match it. It's got the inside, the Telefunken V72. It's based around that to match this.
Is this a guy in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah,
amazing.
you should go and see him.
Yeah.
So this can be used as my preamp for the synth stuff as well. So I'm just going to hold on. Sorry. Let's take a sec.
So tell us about. So you quite heavy plugins in terms of Logic. Is it all built in?
I mean, when it comes to
work?
mix down, yeah, I use a lot of plugins. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So,
That's nice.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't even sound that great.
Cool.
It's going to.
So what in your past records? What have you used this on as a bass thing?
Oh man, I use it for everything. I mean, it's just such an incredibly versatile synthesizer. It's not the sort of thing you can just turn on.
Yeah, especially with. Is it preset driven? It's not, is it? Oh, it is a little bit.
It's
So warm.
see now I've got to get both
Because I think
sides in tune.
I've got the Prophet VST,
Yeah.
but it
So the Prophet
it
5.
sounds thin. In
Yeah,
comparison.
I know that one. The Prophet 5, which was the smaller version of this earlier version, is a great synth. So you see it now. I've got it's out of tune now, and
Yeah, so something about those older synths, you actually have to tune them like instruments, don't you?
yeah, you certainly do.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's an amazing machine.
Cool.
and I use it all the time on so much
I can
stuff.
imagine you can sit here for hours with that.
Yeah, I
thing.
need to get it. I probably, yeah. So those are my main polyphonic, big polyphonic synths. They're both 8 voice and they're both 16 VCOs.
Cool,
So
cool.
they're the sort of flagship, I guess, of their particular makers. Like that's the biggest synth that Roland made, and this is the biggest synth that Sequential Circuits made.
Very cool.
And actually, I bought them off the same guy
Oh, wow.
in Whakatane, and I had to drive down to Napier to pick them up. And he regrets selling both of them.
I'm sure he does.
And you know, for what both of these go for now,
They appreciate
small
value.
fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, you're paid 10,000 US is the going price for a good Jupiter 8 now. I mean, this, yeah.
I think Roland has released the Boutique series recently, which is sort of like the Jupiter thing. But it's very condensed. It's very small. It doesn't have all the knobs. And
I like the new. I like the sound of the new stuff, and you know, the Roland Jupiter 8 plugin is fantastic. I did a whole track on. I did a whole track on an album of mine, my most recent album, which I made in the UK. It was called 5 a Day.
Okay.
And I made it in the UK. I never bought these synths to the UK because they were too big, and I left them in New Zealand.
Yep. Okay.
But I actually had, there's a song on this album called Zoot Allure, which is the opening track. That's all plug-in.
Oh wow.
That's like the arpeggio.
So that's the Jupiter 8.
Yeah,
arpeggio?
that's actually the Jupiter 8 Arturia plugin. So what you're hearing there is the arpeggio. But the thing is, using the plugin, because it's based on the real one, it was really easy for me to use the plugin. Now, if I'd never owned a Jupiter 8, I wouldn't have known how to program it. So what I'm saying is, I didn't have my Jupiter 8 when I made that track, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to use the plugin, and it was great.
Awesome.
So it's not necessarily about the gear, but I love owning the gear.
Oh,
and I
absolutely.
love mucking around with it and coming up with new things.
Yep.
This is the
Roland
original.
Space Echo?
This is the original Space Echo.
Oh wow.
So the RE301 is the most well-known one, but these are very rare. I actually picked this up last year. Wasn't really working on Trade Me, quite cheap, and I fixed it up.
And brought it back to life.
Brought it back to life, and it's fantastic. So these units are very, very famous. The Roland Space Echoes.
Absolutely.
They've been used on millions of tracks, and the sound of 70s reggae could never have happened without these.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the guy's name that pioneered Roland? Fortunately, he passed away recently.
I've got the book down there. I'll
try and find it.
It's the grey one.
This one here.
Yeah. I can't remember his name.
Can't remember.
Yeah, we were talking about that before, but
he was so.
But yeah, I think as a
innovative.
company, Roland really, without really knowing it, they've managed to define the sound of electronic music in our time. I mean, you can't really imagine music now without the
With the 808 or 909, those are
and all the synths.
iconic.
You know,
Here we go. Is it Ikataro Kahi Shahi-san? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to get butchered online for this, for not knowing.
Oh well,
but,
you can cut that out. But here we go. So that's the 301. Oh, that's the 201.
That's the 201 version.
This is the 200.
Okay.
Which, so when I saw it on Trade Me, I went, crikey, that's rare, and snapped it up.
Snapped it up.
I've bought a lot of stuff on Trade Me the same way.
Yep.
So that's over here. So monitoring wise, I've got a pair of original 80s Yamaha NS10s, a matched pair with consecutive serial numbers. They are the industry standard. It's funny, a lot of people don't like them, and I've just had a mate over from London, A-Sides, I was talking about doing the drum and bass. But we actually, at the end of it, after 2 weeks, he was like, yeah, they've got a great mid-range. And the thing is that, they're NS10s, they're in every studio. I don't know, when you're working for a long time, you need to edit some parts, whatever, I swap back to these.
Okay. What what
I've
powered
got
amp
a
are you
I've got a
using?
100 watts per channel American Hafler power amp. So you've got to have at least 100 watts per channel with NS10s.
Okay.
That's one thing I've definitely found out. You've got to have a really grunty amp.
And what are those secondary?
So these
monitors?
are some new Neumann studio monitors that I got. My friend Mike Pato in the UK has a pair, and I'd read about them when they came out a couple of years ago, and they're amazing. They're like for a small monitor, near field monitor, they're brilliant. Like, they're not fatiguing. You can listen to them all day long.
Yeah, they're very smooth.
They're really, really nice.
You don't want to overpower the room as well with big monitors when you don't need to.
Well, big monitors, talking of big monitors, those are my big listening monitors. So those are early 80s Technics SB7s, which are incredible.
Passive, active, or?
They're passive. So I've got that vintage Perot, 80s Perot 150 watts per channel driving them.
Wow.
Underneath there. They're an amazing speaker. They were very expensive when they came out. I managed to pick those up really cheap on Trade Me. I actually can't believe it, and I've actually consequently become friends with the guy who sold them. He couldn't believe he couldn't believe they went for so cheap, because I've actually found a pair in Germany recently for about 2,000 euros.
Whoa!
So they were very, very high-end home hi-fi speakers, but that's what they sound like.
Are you able to demo? Okay.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, just what I was playing before.
I love that. I love how you can just tweak it all here. It's not at the back. It's all at the front.
Yeah, they're really
Tweak it to
great.
your
They're a
room.
bit, because the room's not really treated over there. They're a bit bright over there, but they're incredible. They're incredible hi-fi speakers.
No, it's awesome.
So then, going back to synths. Well, actually, this is a drum tracks, which is the matching.
Is it a drum machine or
Yeah, this is a So this was the matching drum machine for this.
for the Prophet?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you
So
wanted
they're a match made in heaven.
Yep. They're both very early MIDI. And if you're to save sounds, you have to use a cassette. So this is actually really cool. I just was offered it very cheaply from a friend. The guy who fixes my gear. And I was like, yeah, I might as well buy it. It's not the world's most brilliant drum machine, but it's been used on a lot of...
From what era is... Oh, no, early 80s as well.
Yeah, so early 80s. So it's got a very early 80s, like Miami Vice sort of sound.
Cool.
I mean, Sequential Circuits and Lynn were the guys who did all the big drum machines back then, Oberheim as well. And as we were talking about before, the difference with these machines is that they sampled all these, so these bass, they're all...
Snare, rim, tom.
They're all actual
drum samples, yep.
And
Rompler.
Yeah, so they're charmingly old-fashioned. But then saying that, I mean, Prince did all his albums with a Lynn drum machine. And that's very much the sound. So you can put effects on. Yeah, they're cool. I like it. I've only used it for one tune so far.
Very cool.
So this is a...
this is a early 70s...
Yeah, so this is
original Arp Odyssey.
Yeah, so original Arp Odyssey. So just in the last year,
Wow.
they've actually reissued these. So ARP was originally quite a small company, but they were used by a lot of musicians.
Is there any way to turn this on? Because I'd love to hear it.
Yep. It was on before. So I spoke about Weather Report before. So these... Joe Zawinul, it's on, Joe Zawinul from Weather Report used the ARP 2600, which was a very famous big semi-modular synthesizer, so it was a big thing.
Have you heard the reissue Arp?
I have heard, the ARP plugins sound really great as well, so this machine is amazing for bass.
Oh wow.
I use it on a lot of tracks of bass. But it's also amazing for leads.
That is very cool. feel like stepping into a time machine, like I'm back in
Yeah, I mean,
the 70s. It's that sound. It's
a
like,
plug-in
wow.
doesn't sound like that. It's,
And you were saying earlier, this is back when it was all handmade.
yeah, so
You
this
can
is a
actually-
very early serial number one. So I think it's in my research I've done, it's sort of in the first 100 that were made of this model.
Wow.
I mean, you can see it's very home. I mean, for a commercially available synthesizer, it looks very homemade.
Yes.
So here's the serial number 28613 out of Newton, Massachusetts.
Newton, America.
America. It's been serviced quite a lot. And the last service I did, the guy said, look, that should stay in your studio. Don't take it gigging.
No.
Yeah. So this machine I got from, as I said, from Steve Robinson, who had a studio with Alan Jansen. So that's where the studio was called Uptown Studios. Was where Alan Jansen recorded Paulie's album, the IMC album, which of course was one of the most famous records in New Zealand. So before, so Simon Griggs formed a record label called Ha Records. I was one of the first persons he signed, and then I made Shift Left, and then I recorded it in the original Revolver Studios.
Okay.
This Revolver Studios is out in Waiuku now, George Shushkoff, but originally it was by the Sanitarium building in Pa Road, sort of out by the airport. So in 1994 I recorded the album. The MD of Polygram at the time said, we don't think it's good enough, we want you to go and work with Alan. Or Simon Grigg decided, because Simon was working with Alan Jansen at Uptown. So what we did is we took all of the stuff off the 24 track and then put it into a Fairlight synthesizer. And Fairlight was incredibly, I mean, these synthesizers were like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
This thing was about
Holy
12
hell.
grand or something when it came out. But so that's what's changed in music, is that, you know, for a couple of $1,000s you can have a hit record. I mean, back in the old days, not only did you need a synthesizer which cost $100,000, you needed a tape machine, and you needed, you know,
Yes.
so that's what's changed in music. But so anyway, we took everything off the 24 track onto the Fairlight, and then we remixed the album. That's the album Shift Left that came out, which was my first record. It was released in Europe on Verve. I got a gold record with that. And a lot of people have said to me since that it was because of that record that they got into music. P Money told me that recently.
That's amazing.
He said, you know, bro, when your record came out, when Shift Left came out, I was in school and I thought, wow, this is cool. I want to do that. If Nathan can do it, I can do it.
Inspiring.
You know? So why I'm telling that story is this synthesizer was sitting on, I saw it sitting in there, and I said to Alan, whose is that? And he said, oh, it's Steve's, the other guy in the studio. And then I said, what's happening with that synth? Because I knew about art because of Weather Report. So when I was in school, I knew about art. I mean, just as an aside, my brother and I used to, in the early 80s, used to get the bus in from Beach Haven. We lived in Beach Haven. And we used to get the old Birkenhead Transport buses. Some of the buses were actually from the 1950s, I kid you not. We used to get the bus in on a Friday night. This is when we were about 13, 14. And we used to go down to Kingsley Smith, which was on Key Street, and it was a music shop. And I tell you, it was full of analog synths that basically no one wanted. So I remember there was one side of the shop. There was one side of the shop which was all analog synths, because, you know, by the time, you know, by 1984 or whatever, everyone was into the DX7, everyone was into digital synthesizers. And so all of this sort of stuff and all of the big modular gear, it was all old fashioned, and it wasn't MIDI. It was you know, the pots were crackly, and then you can,
you can hear it crackly.
so it was like, which was fine for me, but so, you know, and the DX7 was all this,
all the rage.
It didn't have any. It was like those membrane. You know, there was those membrane buttons. It didn't even have any sliders, and so. And I remember we had one at school. And I didn't even really like it when we were at school. I was just like, I like the analog gear. So my brother and I used to get the bus, and of course he'd go and look at the guitars, and then I remember they had just the most amazing gear down there. I couldn't afford it at the time, but it was cheap, and I've tried to trace some of it down consequently. So even in the 90s, when I was making Shift Left in 94, people weren't really interested in this sort of stuff, and so Steve sold this synth to me very cheaply.
Wow.
You know, it had been
Very
in a
fortunate.
fire. This had been
Really?
at Marmalade Studios.
And it
So
survived.
Marmalade Studios was a studio in Wellington, and this had been in a fire there. And I remember when I bought it, it was I've cleaned it up since, but it was a bit black.
Oh, wow.
So
It has some stories.
so I bought some. Yeah, you used to be able to buy cheap analog gear, but you can't anymore. So I'm lucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a new.
This is
synth.
the very new. I've got the
Yeah.
monologue version, and I love it. I sync it with my drum machine, and because it's got the in-out sync, so you can actually relay it with multiple. Rather than MIDIing in and out all the time, you've got the actual in-out buttons, which is just basically the old headphone stereo cables, but they're awesome. It can just it syncs really well.
So this is a 4-voice polyphonic synth. It's got analog. It's analog, and why I bought it is I just had really great reviews about it, and I wanted something new for the studio, so I use it for bass.
You do?
Mainly for bass,
Yep.
because it's just really great for bass. So
Yeah.
I often, when I work with other keyboard players, I always get them to record MIDI as well, unless it's on the roads.
Yeah.
And then I will take their part, and then I could spend months or whatever just taking the
MIDI
MIDI
part.
and then re-putting it through all the synths.
Yeah.
So I've actually got a MIDI unit which I need to put in this, because MIDI for me means you can have a fantastic keyboard player in the studio on a session,
Yeah.
and then re-dream up new ideas for their sound. You're not just stuck with what they played on the day. So this is a really great little synth. It's cheap.
Yeah, I love it.
You've got to be careful with programming it because it's got this clicky thing with the filter. But I think for the price, and for me for a bass machine, it's really
good.
It's really cool.
The filters are screaming.
Yeah.
It can, for me, like I've got the monologue version, which is the mono version.
Yeah.
It can do MS2000 sounds. It can do chiptune. It can do, but yeah, really good bass.
Really, yeah. I
Really
think
awesome.
because it's I find it fantastic for bass. I haven't really explored it as a polyphonic synth for chords and all that, but I've got all the other stuff.
Yeah. No, that's
so over
very
here,
cool.
my friend Jason Smith, who's a musician and producer, does some film and television work.
This is the Jupiter.
Yeah. So he's actually this was sitting in his cupboard for years.
Oh wow.
And wasn't working. I got it fixed. Now it's not. It's working okay, but I need to get it fixed again. It reminds
Is
me.
it a string machine or what is it?
Oh, it's a Roland Jupiter 4. So it actually looks like a string machine, but it's an incredible. It's the first Jupiter. So there was the Jupiter 4,
okay.
then the Jupiter 6, and then the Jupiter 8. So this is a very, very famous synthesizer in the Roland lineup. I know it looks more like an
It's
organ.
got a life of its own.
It looks more like an organ, but that was this.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It
That
looks
was your
more like
knee.
an organ, but it's an incredibly capable 2 VCO per voice 4-voice synthesizer.
Okay.
It's really it's just the styling. They changed the styling, and it's got the presets down here. But
Yep,
I do like
it's
how there's all about there's a preset on here called the Force.
Called the Force. Got to use that one.
So they talk about it in that Roland book quite a lot.
It's very cool.
And of course, Fender Rhodes.
Fender Rhodes.
So yes,
Classic Rhodes.
this is also Jason's, and this was sitting in a studio not being used for years. So I'm really grateful to Jason that he's lent me this gear, but I use it. And I think the worst thing you can do for any piece of equipment is not use it, because synths do not like being left
Collecting dust, no way.
No, and then the batteries can leak, and you hear all sorts of horror stories. So the best thing to do is to turn them on.
actually play them.
Yeah.
I hear that day in, day out, That's absolutely the best way to keep the old gear alive.
Yeah, it's like having an old
It's
car.
like an old car,
you
you
know,
got to keep the engine running.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So the Rhodes has been on, countless tracks for me
That's cool.
over the last couple of years. I've had quite a few Fender Rhodes This is a nice one. I've done some recent work on it.
What year was this one made?
That's about a 78, I think. And then my friend gave me.
Oh, there's something. In
he gave me this. I
that?
can't even remember. This is this is an original Fender Rhodes repair kit. So this has got all your replacement parts kit. So that's got all sorts of stuff in there should your Fender Rhodes need fixing. So that's good.
Very cool. I see you're playing around with pedals. Is that a wah down there?
No,
that's
actually... That is... So this is a pedal I use. This is a Rotor Vibe, which I use on the roads.
Okay.
And my friend Mike Pato in the UK hit me to these. So this gives it a real Joe's Arminal Weather Report vibe. It sort of oscillates the sound. I bought this online from America.
That's very cool.
So this is it's a really, really great pedal for the roads. Microphone wise, I've got a vintage SM7 which I use for vocals, horn. Before I had the M149, I use this all the time. I've got quite a few sort of different vintage mics, but now that I've got the Neumann, I just sort of use that.
Yeah, that Neumann is the star, really. Can we fancy that? Is that played?
Oh right, so then onto saxophones and flutes, which I guess is what it's about. This is a very special flute. I got a call from KBB a number of years ago, and this was under someone's bed. So this is my oldest piece of equipment. It's from 1884.
Oh, beautiful!
And it's just a normal C flute. So when I got hold of this, it had never been played. So I felt like it was a bit of a a bit of a crime to play it, because it was like these wooden flutes, you never see in this condition. But it's just a normal flute. It just sounds like a normal flute.
Wow.
Needs a bit of work, actually.
It's very old world sound, 18th century, I guess.
So this was like,
nice.
All flutes were made out of wood. And actually, when I first saw the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra in the 80s, when I was quite young, but the lead flute player, who's dead now, he actually had a wooden flute. So these were used, they made wooden flutes up until the 50s maybe, and then they were replaced with metal.
Okay. But
it's a beautiful.
Beautiful.
It's a great instrument. And then saxophone. This is a 1963 Selmer Mark VI.
Yeah.
Which is the sort of industry standard as far as tenor saxes go. I got this off Brian Smith, who's a New Zealand saxophone player who lived in the UK for many years.
Yeah. Great
sax player. So this was one of his horns. So yeah, it took me sort of my whole life to get a Mark VI, because it's sort of like the Fender Stratocaster of the saxophone,
guitar wheel.
Or a Gibson 335 or whatever. It's like the
so it's
like
the king.
Yeah, I mean everyone played one. I mean Coltrane, John Coltrane, of course, who's the sort of definitive tenor sax player. And the mouthpiece is a 1940s Otto Link.
Wow.
So that's also a very big part of the sound. So the saxophone alone, you might pay a couple of $1,000 just for a vintage for a vintage mouthpiece. So that's what it sounds like. It depends how you play it, I guess. Yeah, it's
that is the instrument you're known for, the saxophone. Beautiful.
Then I've also got...
Round of applause. That's amazing.
I do a lot of playing on soprano. So soprano, I guess, is what I'm known for the soprano because I've done a lot of I do a lot of live work with the soprano, and I've sort of created my own vibe on the soprano, I guess, and not too many people play soprano, so I use it as a lead instrument and have done for over 20 years. So
Okay.
I feel like tenor, it's just the shadow of John Coltrane looms so large on tenor that it is what it is. Whereas I feel like on soprano, I've managed to create more of my own, I guess, sound, I guess you'd say. So that's a 1973 Selma Mark 6, so it's the same as this, is Selma Mark 6.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I use this on a lot of DJ gigs. I never use this on DJ gigs because it's too big.
Mm-hmm.
But I just play this in flute. And I guess for me as well, because soprano hasn't been totally rinsed in terms of people. It's still a bit strange. Like every time I play, people go, "What is that clarinet?" So that's why I find it's great for the more modern stuff or DJ gigs or.
Yeah, right.
Like that track I played before, that sort of techno-y sounding one with the Jupiter 8 plug-in, that's
Yeah.
got soprano on
Soprano.
it. So tenor definitely puts it very much in a box of being jazz, whereas I guess with the soprano, I feel it's more of a modern sound and it hasn't been done to death. So I use it a lot for recording.
It's very cool. Well, Mr. Nathan Haines, everybody, and his fantastic studio. Thank you so much for showing us
cheers,
around.
man. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to get more people in here. This is just my humble little setup, you know.
Beautiful.
But I'd love to take this opportunity to invite people to record in here. I can do nice tracking for vocals. I can, you know, I've got some nice preamps and gear and stuff. So hopefully you can get hold of me through my website.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Nathan Haines, everyone, and thank you so much
Thanks
for the tour.
Thank you, man. It's such a pleasure.
The pleasure is ours. So there you go. That's our studio tour in the wonderful Nathan Haines recording studio. Hope you've enjoyed the show. And remember to stay cool and stay creative. Check out more episodes on our website, musicstudios.co.nz. Oh!